Chapter 2. The life of the embodied soul on the planet and its goals in the embodiment. The embodiment of the soul depends on several reasons. The first is the training of young souls and gaining experience during embodiment. The second, already karmic reason, is the working off of undissolved thirsts and attachments in the consciousness of the soul, where the planet acts as a purgatory for the purification of the soul. The third is the help of a highly spiritual soul, angel, to other souls on the chosen planet, with a subsequent ascent of this soul to higher dimensions of spiritual life. The incarnation creates a condition for working out all the causes in the soul at once, gaining new experience in the consciousness of the soul of planetary life. You can work out the thirst of the soul, clean up unnecessary developments, including cleaning with the help of various settlers, demons, who can act as helpers for a practicing soul, testing it for strength of mind, and vice versa. If the soul is not a spiritual practitioner, then transform it into its demonic likeness, lowering it after yourself into the lower purgatory. If the soul is lucky and cleansed, the soul changes the karmic incarnation of a person to an angelic one, being born in paradise, or goes higher, into the incarnation of the God or the Creator of the universe, who will be even more fortunate, and his soul will completely dissolve the karmic accumulation of individual consciousness, having dissolved his individual soul in his single eternal consciousness. He will return to himself, Nirvana, the God of eternity, and will arrive in himself as an active space of a single consciousness, spontaneously creating miracles in all his eternity, responding to the call of souls in all universes. Those who do not practice the cleansing of the soul will continue to wander through the planetary purgatories, punished by themselves by the low vibration of their soul, incarnating in straitjackets of the physical body and dreaming that the Savior Doctor will again look into their ward and help them raise the vibration of the soul, not wanting to do anything with themselves. For such souls, spiritual teachings have been created as a diagnosis for treatment and helpers on the path. Therefore, do not condemn the variety of spiritual teachings, trying to understand the essence of spiritual teaching yourself. If possible, reading the primary sources of ancient publications, there are different as illnesses of individual souls and entire nations. They, like the original teachings that their creators gave teachers, had the main meaning of saving the soul from the clutches of death, and the fact that over thousands of years of transformation of the teachings, they have lost these properties for the most part. This is the merit of false followers, which have turned current spiritual teachings into religious dogmas with dubious influence of the treatment of the human soul, and have become similar to ritual practices in which the brain takes part more than a human soul. Therefore, they produce a minimal effect on the soul, and for the most part, these rituals have become very comfortable for demon-possessed people, since they do not change anything in his soul, and his settlers, on the contrary, harmonize their symbiosis. This became possibly only because the false followers of spiritual teachings forgot about their mission in teaching and turned into cashers to collect money in exchange for a small return of spiritual knowledge alien to their souls, and privatized not by right of spiritual purity. Spiritual knowledge. This applies to 90% of the spiritual teachings on the planet. Therefore, a person has to save the soul mainly by himself, by learning a lot of spiritual knowledge and selecting individual spiritual practices for yourself to save your soul. Having learned many spiritual teachings, a person understands that they all speak in different ways about the same state love, peace, kindness, reconciliation, forgiveness, and unity of everything. These states are outside spiritual teachings and religious dogmas. They are one in eternity. Therefore, no religion can privatize love. Therefore, spiritual teachings in their religious segment and the traditions of the people only create conditions for the recollection of these divine states in the human soul. They are like spiritual water washing away dirt from the soul, and each soul decides whether to use this spiritual water or not. Therefore, arguing about the correctness of religion is like arguing about the quality of water. For thousands of years, the quality is lost. But one who truly believes that this spiritual water will purify his soul really cleans himself, while others argue about the qualities of influences and the purity of spiritual water per soul. Others at this time are already being washed, and there in the washed soul they always begin to sow your forgotten divine states. It makes no sense to argue about what spiritual teaching led to this. Since the deed is done, the soul is washed, therefore any religion, like purified spiritual water, to some extent does its job, cleanses the soul. The main thing is to use it for its intended purpose, and not talk about how illusory I wash myself. Therefore, the cleansing of the soul will be illusory. This illusory cleansing leads to talk about the quality of spiritual water and the truth of this or that religion. Talkers leave the bath of the planetary embodiment as dirty souls, waiting again for their turn to be embodied in the purgatory bath. Therefore, do not waste time in the spiritual bath, wash your souls, and if you come to purgatory in order to get even more dirty, this is your right and free will, though at some point in your next embodiment you will no longer be in a bath, but in a crematorium of souls, where your already bath attendants, spiritual teachers, will not wash. So what is left of your soul has turned into a solid mud of a terrible demon in the lower hell or the crematorium. And since the mud is not washed off from the mud, it is dissolved into the fundamental principle, which is the first spirits, the first letters, are constituting the consciousness of the one God. If you washed your soul in a common bath of one of the religions and want individual spa procedures for in-depth cleansing of the soul, you can become spiritual practitioners with a personal in-depth approach and turn your whole life into cleansing the soul until it completely dissolves in the God of eternity, becoming one. But many souls fooled from childhood by the same, not practices about goals and life priorities, again and again, turn into meaningless lived lives, becoming slaves to physical thirst, turn the planet of purgatory into a madhouse and just rage. They do not notice how they take in a demon that helps to transform their soul into their likeness and move after death to even tougher purgatories than the human body. Having occupied the body of an animal during a new embodiment, and then even lower, they descend into non-material purgatory until they completely dissolve in the lower hell. Another pressure of the global collective demon on the soul of a person comes directly from childhood, and this is done with the help of vaccinations, a virus in a small dose to each child, supposedly from epidemics, but these viruses and epidemics are created by the ruling planetary demon, and everything seems to be logical. The vaccine is got in order to survive in an epidemic, for one thing, but it blocks in the human body, as a symbiosis with the soul, the possibility of spiritual development, and the exit of consciousness to the astral worlds for the main goal of the soul in the embodiment of spiritual perfection and the disclosure by the soul of its divine qualities, which means it turns a person's life into an animal-like slave for the purpose of the ruling elites, because the elites who know this never vaccinate their children, giving them a small chance, not in vain, to live their lives, but still developed spiritually. The rest are made an obedient herd of slaves. And when the old vaccines of the virus stop working, in the general mass, they're immediately ready to infect the masses with the new virus. And, of course, vaccinations against it, because demons are always so tough. Or you live vaccinated like our slave, or you don't need you and die unvaccinated, because you, our spiritual enemy, must die from a virus. But spiritually strong souls do not infect any viruses, but there are very few such souls on Earth in ancient times and in distant places on the planet where the collective demon has not reached. There are always more of them. No, these are mountains, distant monasteries, islands where people live who from childhood could not be inoculated with a virus by a collective demon. In such places their spiritual development proceeds calmly and harmoniously. Clairvoyance appears, constant travels in the subtle body at night. During the day spiritual practices are mixed with everyday life problems. Everything seems to be like for all people, but not all. They feel the constant spiritual development of their soul, trying to reach out to other souls, not realizing that the rest are blocked. I have set a block for you since childhood from the tree of universal spiritual knowledge. Do not eat the apples given by the snake. You are Adam and Eve. Because how will your life be, Adam? And who asks you in child? No one, forcibly instilling the virus of slavery. Think about it, and don't worry. If the impulse of the spirit in you is strong, not only the virus inoculations will dissolve, but any virus in the body, even all foreign implants will melt, if your spirit wants. Therefore, the soul needs to correctly perceive reality in incarnation, and having set life priorities, divide its life into harmonious sectors in which everything will be equal. The sector of people living ordinary lives who enjoy life and work for a harmonious life. The sector of a spiritual practitioner who dissolves the karma of ego consciousness. One will help the other. The person living an ordinary life will help the spiritual practitioner, and the person living an ordinary life will help the spiritual practitioner. And when they become one, the soul, having increased the purity of its consciousness and state, will no longer be able to incarnate on planets of purgatory in the straitjacket of the physical body, but will enter higher realms of incarnation according to its new spiritual purity. Therefore, the correct understanding of your reality is that you are here as a soul, in a straitjacket of a physical body, for the purpose of increasing the spiritual power of your soul with the help of its karmic cleansing. An assistant to this, your physical body is like a demon for the soul, which must be subdued and tamed with the spiritual power of the soul, because your body, constantly pulls your soul for any reason of its manifestation, using your soul as a battery for your games in the ego consciousness. And even the suicide of a physical body, the demon, does not break the vicious circle and spiritual problems in your soul, and you will have to incarnate again, maybe in an even worse state in incarnation than now, and still solve the spiritual problem in your soul. But when the soul subdues its body, this half-mad demon, full of ego consciousness, making it an obedient tool, an assistant for the spiritual transformation of the soul. Then the goal of the soul in incarnation is achieved, and new eternal, more interesting games awaited in its single eternity. Therefore, every soul has the right to choose its future, not breaking under the onslaught of a collective planetary demon, calling you to hell with love, imposing its goals, from the beginning subjugating you to itself, on the planet, out of your ignorance, confusing you in the priorities for life, and creating for your hopeless conditions for submission in any areas of life. Then, obviously, due to the fact of low vibrations that have become familiar to you, it determines you into lower realities of your future life, until the complete dissolution of your soul, which is the second death in the lower hell. But if you become a spiritual practitioner and use the pressure on yourself, the entire collective demon in your favor, as an increase in the strength of the spirit in your soul, then the collective planetary demon will be like a teacher, a simulator on whom you will test the strength of the spirit of your soul, and then everything that happens to you in this embodiment will benefit your soul. Therefore, there is no exit situation. There is a simple lack of understanding of the reality of one's existence here in this embodiment and goals in it. Therefore, one can hate God and the whole world, not realizing that it's all you, and you are one. Therefore, wake up, look in the mirror, and there, under the straitjacket of your physical body, in the depth, your free divine soul lives, which screams, call for help itself, and waits for release, finally uttering the phrase, "Even if this day was my last in this embodiment on the planet, then all the same, I will live it in maximum spiritual and physical purity." And the voice of the ego consciousness of the demon of the body wants to rage in its thirsts, sometimes kill itself from hopelessness without understanding what is happening. And why is this punishment for him? Life in purity. Therefore, gather in your spirit and direct your spirit to your soul in order to help yourself become one, transforming the demon of the body and your soul into a single state of a free angel, as your pure, divine, multidimensional, living thought, having torn off the straitjacket of the physical body from your soul. Free yourself, moving from the negative to the positive of your united eternity, carrying in yourself the eternal light of the wisdom of the divine consciousness, helping the rest of yourself to break out of the hopeless state of misunderstanding of your life reality. Helping others yourself, you yourself will be faster and more beautiful. You will regain your divine self in your united eternity. Therefore, thinking about the goals of incarnation of a soul, we will understand that in everything manifested as the living spiritual consciousness of eternity, consciousness has limits of manifestation, from the primordial first spirit, thirst letters, to a single consciousness of eternity. That is, the God of eternity. Everything between these extreme limits is an embodied consciousness in living thoughts, images, from the simplest to the most complex. Therefore, so the soul, at the limit of the path of self-knowledge, will return to itself as far as possible in the one God of eternity, dissolving into the unity of its eternal consciousness and ceasing to be a personal soul, even if this happens after a very long time, such as the lifetime of a personal creation of an individual universe, that in terms of eternity, this is a moment after which her soul will still decide to merge with herself as one. Therefore, the soul in incarnation decides for himself how many millions of incarnations he will be born and live a regular life, creating perpetual masses and scenery for spiritually practicing souls, which are the only ones who use their embodiment for their intended purpose, and the entire stage, extras, and scenery on the planetary stage serve only them. Just think, millennia of embodiments pass, the masses of souls, the life of an ordinary person changes, the scenery is changing, and those who create them call themselves the masters of life on the planet. There are religious movements, the government of countries and associations, billionaires creating the benefits of civilization. But all of them just slaves creating and maintaining scenery on the planetary stage, which are used by spiritual practices, which at this time create themselves as the transformation of their souls into angels, gods of the universes, or enter into themselves the God of eternity. Therefore, those who live an ordinary life Think over the fact that once in a million embodiments ago, my soul and the like of me went into the first incarnation, and I continue to bathe in my ego consciousness, and I am proud that I am a billionaire and the owner of the world. I create as a slave, extras and scenery on the planetary stage, and at this time, the soul with which I began its first incarnation has already created its universe thousands of incarnations ago. And in what unthinkable different realities I am with it. On the one hand, I am a slave of my ego consciousness, and on the other hand, free God of his universe, but ignorance of all this calms down the slave of the intellect in his ego consciousness, because he has other priorities to fight with other slaves of consciousness for a place and power on the planetary stage, creating again and again extras and scenery for new future gods. Therefore, a spiritual practitioner looks with pity at the just livers, the master of the stage. They, performing slave labor, servicing the planetary stage, do not themselves use its benefits for their intended purpose, but simply fight for the illusion of accumulating wealth, leaving the stage materially and spiritually poor. Therefore, the souls must correctly prioritize, harmonizing the overall stage so as not to lead themselves into endless slavery, their own and the conclusions imposed on them. Nourishing their ego of the consciousness is constantly thickening the walls of their prison. And this is what happens on the planet. One ego consciousness helps to thicken the wall of the prison to another. Not allowing it to be a free God whispers to him about eternal slavery on the planet and such a desired reward for it, because it's a reward already here and now. And so eternity passes to this deceived soul, having been an illusory host on the planetary stage. The unfortunate deceived soul returns again and again to a spiritual purgatory, like a first grader with a second-grade student, and again dreaming about the eternal, allows himself to be deceived by a gang that has spent longer in planetary imprisonment, and accepting their priorities again wins a vicious circle of karmic self-deception in a new incarnation. Therefore, only where strong souls break the magic of ego consciousness, breaking out of their own prison of inferences and going out into freer incarnations, being born on heavenly planets in the bodies of free angels. And there is not far from the God of their universe. Therefore, wake up souls, slaves of your ego consciousness. Help yourself and the rest of the mentally imprisoned. Break the 1,000-year-old chains in your and their souls, breaking the vicious circle of the looped consciousness, the symbol of which is 3 sixes. This is a symbol of the geometry of the movement of a non-free spirit in the soul, which flew into incarnations into the sphere on the planet Earth and fell into tricks, becoming a conclusion, having hardly escaped from the planetary sphere after death. Again and again it's caught in a new incarnation based on its karmic obsession and conclusions in the ego consciousness of the soul. Therefore, the number as a symbol for all self-trapped souls to their conclusions in the ego consciousness, there are 3 sixes. Turn them horizontally and connect their tails, and you will see that this is a symbol of geometry that outlines your soul catching in various spheres of manifestation of consciousness, from planetary spheres to any sphere of activity where the spirit of your soul is looped. This is not the number of the devil. This is the looping of the ego consciousness. But if you uncycle the ego consciousness, breaking your own and the conclusions imposed on you with true knowledge, then the free spirit, escaping from the sphere of inference, will change the symbol of the already free soul into 3 triples, expand it horizontally and connect it This is a symbol of the geometry of the movement of the free soul, freely like a ball jumping through the planetary spheres of incarnation without getting hung up in them. It also freely and easily changes them for your height, without getting hung up in any sphere of activity of the planetary consciousness and nothing. Even the death of the physical body will force such a soul to fall into a conclusion in the ego consciousness, since the ego consciousness is dissolved and the conclusions become plastic like water, helping such a soul to glide by passing any obstacles to your highest goal. Therefore, the soul chooses for itself that will be inscribed on its forehead 3 sixes, which is obsession of the spirit in its manifestation, or 3 threes, which is freedom of the spirit in its manifestation, and the devil, as an archangel, performing work in the universes, given him the God of eternity, has no direct participation in your spiritual choice. He just sometimes creates scenarios for you on the stage of your eternity, like the God of your universe, and you make the spiritual personal choice yourself, which symbols will be a priority on your forehead on your consciousness. Therefore, do not look for a scapegoat, but look more often correctly deep into yourself in the mirror, because there in the depth, you, as a potentially eternal soul, are the only reason for your self-expression in a looped or free self-perception of yourself, and no one except yourself will draw on your forehead what your soul is at the moment and rewrite what you have drawn by yourself is also in your power, since while the soul is alive, nothing is the final diagnosis for it. Therefore, spiritual recovery at any physical age is within the power of the soul. Even demons inhabiting the bodies of spiritual practitioners at the will of a strong practicing soul, receiving the correct teaching, change, transform themselves and come out as completely new souls, transforming their terrible images. So is it worth it to be afraid to start the path of spiritual transformation for souls not yet in demonic forms? Ask yourself this question. The soul is a living plastic consciousness in an image. It takes the image according to the consciousness and state of consciousness and fixes it in itself. Therefore, do not let others mold your soul. Be yourselves brilliant sculptors of your living soul. Start washing the clay of the soul with love, like spiritual water, smoothing and softening it, turning, transforming it into a spiritual warrior, where love, like a sword in its hand, will defeat all its enemies, such as the ego consciousness in a frozen conclusion, melt the image of a demon in itself, transforming it into the image of angelic love. So the only true goal of the incarnation of the soul will be achieved, to go through everything and return to oneself pure, that is, the standard of the soul, as a living diamond of consciousness, a brilliant creation of the God of eternity, of a single consciousness. How the soul was originally created, so the path to yourself will end in its soul, uniting in itself the one God of eternity. But for now, think, those souls who have not yet made the right decision and want to rage more, testing yourself for strength, there is complete free will for this.